Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. I'm Ajahn Sona, and welcome back after our little hiatus over the summer. We hope that you have some questions for us in the chat bar, or as we call it, the question bar. And let us begin with the first question, Pia.
Ajahn, our first question today is from the live stream from No One Everyone in Iran. If we were to hypothesize that the world is truly finite, that it would end on its own, never to arise again, all remaining karma and suffering would then end with it too, regardless of individual efforts. Further rebirth wouldn't make sense anymore in a world that has come to an end. Only in an infinitely cyclical world would the whole scope of Dhamma and making mindful effort to exit this mass of suffering make sense. The Buddha did not teach annihilation, except annihilation of suffering. Why would he be so adamant to do so in a world that all suffering would eventually end anyway?
Well, because the Buddhist cosmology is such that it is a cyclical universe. And it doesn't just end. This is not necessarily in contradiction to even modern, cosmology. There's a mathematician, physicist named Roger Penrose who has a cyclical universe theory. There's a number of other very respected astrophysicists that also hold that view as well. So this is, anyway, the Buddhist view is of enormous lengths of time of each cycle, a universal cycle, and it recurs. And one of the questions that the Buddha does not ask is, does it have an ultimate beginning? And he says that's impossible to calculate. So the Buddhist view of things is that it's a cycle, and the only way out is through wisdom and a systematic practice which leads to the end of your cycle of existences, and that would be called nirvana or nibbana. But yes, the Buddhist viewpoint would not make sense if there was a definite, ending to the world and the universe, if it wasn't cyclical. So the Buddhist cosmology says, yes, it is cyclical, and merely an end to the universe is not the end of your problems. Okay, so let's go to the next question.
Next question from the live stream is from Hermit Mouse in Arizona, United States. Do you think there is a limit to how far a lay Buddhist can make it on the path?
No. At the time of the Buddha, he points out a number of lay people. I would say that actually more lay people than monastics attained some degree of enlightenment at the time of the Buddha. And why is this? Why become a monastic if lay people attain enlightenment more than the monks? It is because there's a much smaller proportion of monastics to the lay community. So maybe less than 1% of Buddhist communities are monastics. So if you have 100 times more lay people, and you're going to have perhaps a larger proportion of that, or some proportion of that attaining to this wisdom, this understanding, enlightenment. So there is no impediment to it as the lay person, except that your personal circumstances may prevent you from practicing. So, if you have 12 kids and, a rice farm, you don't have much time left for meditation. But some people at the time, there were quite a number of people from royal families, aristocratic families, as the Buddha was, who had plenty of time and leisure for practice. And so the Buddha points out that he had all kinds of lay disciples that attained the first, second, and even the third stage of enlightenment. What happens at the fourth stage is there's a kind of an automatic renunciation. One does not remain in the household life at full enlightenment. But the other stages of enlightenment, the first, second, third stages of enlightenment, is possible to remain in the household life. And your progress in that situation does depend on whether you have supportive conditions or not. So that's the advantage of going off to the monastic life, or at least a good monastic life, is that you have time and supportive conditions for the practice. But it's like, mathematics or something like this. People who don't go to mathematic departments in universities still could, if they were interested, they could learn mathematics on their own, and there are self-instructed people, etc. So that's the same with the spiritual practice. It's an education is what it is. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next question, Pia.
Next question from the live stream is from Terry in New York City, United States. Any advice on how not to over or underreact to strong emotions? If I feel sadness, for instance, sometimes accepting that the feeling is temporary seems helpful, and I try to be somewhat patient as it runs its course. If instead I try to be more diligent, thinking that I have to solve the problem as a negative emotion immediately, I sometimes think this can make things worse.
Yeah, you're talking as if you're two people, one that has a strong emotion and another one that is deciding whether to react to the strong emotion. That language doesn't make sense. So it would make sense if it was somebody else who had strong emotions and you were deciding whether to react to that or not. But this is the confusion actually in modern psychology. People, especially mindfulness kind of teachings, where you're kind of supposed to be a mere observer of your emotions. This is a big mistake, just a very logical, this is an absolute mistake. You're not detached from your own emotions. What is happening is you are either angry or sad, or you aren't. But you're not both angry or sad and detached from your anger and sadness. This is a big confusion. You'll see this in many of these teachings, spiritual teachings as well, that somehow you're able to stand outside of your own emotion. No, you're not. You are that emotion is what your mind is doing at this time. The fact that you know it's occurring, and you have some sense, this is anger, I am angry, is some progress, but it's not enough. So that's why the Buddha is talking about prevention and removal of these negative types of emotions. And of course, it's much easier to prevent than to remove. So when you're talking about having a very strong emotion and then suddenly stopping it in the middle of it, yes, of course, it's difficult to do that. But it's not problematic to attempt. It would be better, though, if you started the day off with kind of a collection or a recollection. This is what mindfulness really is. This word mindfulness is used everywhere, but mindfulness is a form of recollection. You recollect the basic attitude you want to walk into life with at the beginning of the day. You say all kinds of stuff is going to happen. People will say things that I don't approve of. People will do things that I don't approve of, or perhaps some people will say things that I really like, and I need to have a recollection. I need to orient myself in the morning to be serene and detached in the middle of this. Now, being serene and detached doesn't mean that you're without emotion or that you don't respond to anything. It means that you have a collected response to things. And in fact, that detachment is not a word for being cold and unemotional. Detachment is that you're you're not being manipulated by the circumstances around you. Your strings are not being pulled by the circumstances. You are your own puppet master. You decide how you want to feel. And you can feel all right. In the midst of people with contrary behavior and opinions, you can feel just fine. And if you do, then you will have control of your life. If you don't, if you allow other people to pull your strings, to provoke your emotions, then you're not in control of your life. So that's how you should think about this whole question. It's a very important question, and it's a misunderstanding as well, which I repeat quite often. I have a book which I will show you. It is called What Comes Before Mindfulness? And it is about right effort. And one of the great misunderstandings, because mindfulness is everywhere. It's probably the most significant innovation in Western psychological teachings in the last 20 or 25 years, the introduction of mindfulness into psychiatry and psychology, etc. But quite often it's not well understood. I mean, it does come from Buddhist teachings, but it can't be separated from right effort, an understanding of what mindfulness is supposed to be carrying out. So I've written this whole book, which you can find on Amazon, called What Comes Before Mindfulness? Yeah.
Next question is from Betty in Langley, BC, Canada. Where can I find Buddha's teaching on living in community? A committee is tasked with creating a process for handling residents who break or abuse bylaws or policies of the society. What do you suggest?
I suggest a book by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And the title of this book is, Pia, what would that title of that book be?
Ajahn, that is The Buddha's Teachings on Social and Communal Harmony by Bhikkhu Bodhi.
Yes, it's almost as if we planned that, isn't it? So The Buddha's Teaching on Social and Communal Harmony by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Now, Bhikkhu means monk. So I'm an Ajahn. We use various terms for us. Bhikkhu Bodhi, Ajahn Bodhi, I could say, is a very highly esteemed scholar monk, and he is concerned about not just the meditative teachings of the Buddha, but also the amount of great advice that the Buddha has given on communal harmony. What the Buddha did during his lifetime was organize a community, a monastic community and a lay community. And it was very systematically done and very carefully and thoughtfully done, because it persists to this day, 2,500 years later. And I've been living in these monastic communities for the last 36 years, and as a monk. And there's a very refined set of rules and suggestions for how you interact with your fellow monastics and with the lay community as well. And it is a fountain of great advice about how to structure a community and a society as well. So it's a bit overwhelming to just go directly to the large collection on the rules of conduct for communities, or look through the huge volumes of suttas, the discourses of the Buddha, but go to Bhikkhu Bodhi's book, which is written for a general audience, and you'll see all kinds of wonderful suggestions for how to interact and organize within a community. Yeah. Okay, next.
Next question is from the live stream from Sammy in Dallas, Texas, United States. I was wondering what it's like as a monk. I am considering doing a temporary ordination next year and wanted to know what to expect.
Well, there are a number of different types of communities. So my main training is in the contemplative meditative communities, particularly forest communities. And they're also what are called Vinaya communities, which they make a great effort to follow the rules that are laid down by the Buddha during his lifetime for the conduct of monks. Not all monasteries or monastic communities are good at following these rules, and some of them don't even meditate. They can be monastics and not meditate. So you have to choose the community carefully. It's not just all of these monastic communities are alike. They're not alike. So your first obligation is to inform yourself about them. Perhaps do some visits to the ones you're thinking of joining for a period of time, and to also inform yourself of the real standard that monastic life promotes. To be aware of what is the goal of monastic life and some of the conduct that you should be expected to follow, and also expect of your fellow monks as well. So that's a kind of a warning to go in with eyes wide open and to evaluate things carefully and be very selective. Yeah.
Next question from the live stream is from Chris. Dear Ajahn Sona, welcome back. Can you offer some insight into applying anatta to awareness?
Well, it's good to be back. Anatta, for the audience, means no self or non-self. And it's not just a lack of ego. It's a primary teaching which is quite radical. It is, as far as we know, it's the first time in human history that somebody has suggested this, that there isn't a substantial self, that there is no unchanging you in the midst of your mind and body that is the same one that was there yesterday and the same one that'll be there tomorrow. This is a radical, this is some sort of psychological trick which nature plays on us. We have a sense of a continuing self, that there's a me that was there when I was a kid and there when you're 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 years old. But if you inquire carefully into this, it's an untenable idea. You can't be an unchanging self and experience change. And what is consciousness other than change? You can't be conscious what consciousness is the experience of change. Sights change, smells change. Sight, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and ideas are all flows of information, and there is no consciousness without that flowing change. So your consciousness is not stable. It's just continuously changing information. So this is what we have to meditate on. We have to realize that we are a flowing process. We are a verb rather than a noun. I mean, our names, we all have a name, and that name is a noun, as if it was something that was an object that didn't change. But we are continuously, all aspects of us are continuous flows of change. And that helps us undo some delusions about reality. You can start with something like an apple. We call it an apple as if it was a thing, but which stage of the apple are you talking about? I mean, an apple is actually a process, all the way from a seed to a rotten apple. Which one of those are you talking about when you talk about an apple? It's a flow of events. It's appling. An appling tree. And the tree is treeing. It's not a tree, it's treeing. And you are not Bob or Bill. You're bobbing or billing. You are flowing. You are nothing but a flow, in a flow. So everything around you is also flowing as well. Some things look solid, like rocks and so forth, but of course, rocks disappear in volcanoes. They turn to liquid and so forth. Planets dissolve. Planets look fairly solid, but they dissolve into dust. So everything in the universe is process, a verb rather than a noun. So that's the universe the Buddha is wanting you to enter in daily life. So that's the case in daily life. And if you don't think that, you will be shocked and surprised sometimes. When you think something is solid and permanent and lasting, like your car or your house. I mean, recently we had a lot of wildfires in British Columbia, and some people came home and their house wasn't there. It had evaporated into ash. So if you strongly have a sense of security and solidity around your house, and one day you come back and it's gone, you're shocked, traumatized, uncomprehending, and it's because you have not seen that all these things are insubstantial. And of course, people in your life as well are insubstantial. And that's why we're shocked and upset by change in others and sometimes in ourselves as well. But so we have to go with the flow. We have to understand that everything is flowing and changing, and then that undoes unnecessary suffering. So you work on that during the ordinary events of the day. You check on yourself and say, well, why was I so upset about that? Did I not know that things change? And then you start at the beginning of the day. Everything is up for change. All kinds of things happen. And am I in touch with that reality? Right? So that's how you practice it in daily life. Okay, let's go on to the next question.
Next question from the live stream is from Upasika Mustafa. Hello to all those involved in the production of this Dhamma talk. I am very happy to see Ajahn Sona again. Ajahn, I cannot understand how a liberated person still has the first arrow in him. What is certain is that nibbana in daily life means the absence of dukkha vedana. So the first arrow should not exist in a liberated person. What I understand is that every sensation has a certain form in the mind. For example, burning has a special form that differentiates it from itching. But what is common between those two sensations is dukkha vedana. Therefore, in a liberated person, there is a form of itching or burning, but there is no dukkha vedana associated with those sensations. So here the first arrow refers to the form of that sensation and not dukkha vedana.
I suppose everybody understood that, right? Well, from my point of view, it's a very simple question, very lucid question, but I don't think everybody understood it. So this word Vedana means sensation or feeling. We would translate it in English as feeling. The first arrow is from a simile the Buddha gives. He says a man is shot by an arrow, and he then does something strange. He takes another arrow and sticks it in him. And why would he do that? So what is the first arrow? What is the second arrow? The first arrow is physical pain. And then what is the second arrow? Psychological pain. So when we stub our toe, then we feel sorry for ourselves. When it happens to somebody else, we just laugh. But notice how detached you are from somebody else's stub toe, and how sad you are when it's your stub toe. So when, of course, when whatever we identify with, if it's somebody in our family that has some pain, we're very, very empathic. Well, not just empathic, but we suffer. We feel we emotionally suffer. So the second arrow is emotional suffering. The first arrow is physical pain. And we want to realize they can be separated. And physical pain can remain just physical pain. It would be unwise to take another arrow, that is psychological distress, and inflict that on yourself when you already have physical pain. So the Buddha is saying separate these two and you will save yourself much suffering in the psychological dimension. Now, Mustafa asks, how can a liberated person experience the first arrow, the physical pain? Well, even the Buddha experiences physical pain. In his life, his back was bad. He had a sore back, and he had to lie down sometimes to relieve the pain. He said, the only time I'm out of pain with this back thing, he was talking to his fellow monastic Anatta. The only time I'm out of pain is when I'm in deep samadhi, deep meditation. So he can alleviate the pain, the physical pain, and not everybody is able to do this. But he experiences physical pain, and it's very clear that fully enlightened people experience physical pain. It's kind of a disaster. There are such people, it's something you're born with, that do not feel with the body. So there are people who can't feel. They can put their hand on a hot, on a flame and not feel it. They don't have any physical sensations. They usually don't last beyond 25 years because they can be walking around with a broken bone and not know it. So we need pain reception. So we have three types of feelings, the physical feelings, pleasant, neutral, and painful. And it's important to our survival that we have these, we can sense with this. And a fully enlightened person has those things. It's what you make of them. Now, notice even in ordinary life, people are involved in sports and things like this where there's a lot of pain involved. But they're not suffering psychologically. If you run a marathon or something, you see these people, it's very painful at a certain point in the race. You're dealing with physical pain, but they're not sad about that. They know perfectly well that's going to occur. And they may, in fact, they cross the line, and although their body is on fire with pain, they're extremely joyful. You see this in boxing matches and all kinds of these sports. Normally when people get hit in the face and all this kind of stuff, they're upset about it. But in a professional sport, that's what you're in there to do. And at the end of the fight, if you win, even though you've been beat up, you're dancing around with joy, strangely. So it is possible to separate physical sensation from emotional reaction. And that's what's talked about there. Yeah.
Next question from the live stream is from Theodore in Fargo, North Dakota, United States. Dear Longpo, Ajahn Sumedho teaches that Dhamma, and by extension our true nature, is impersonal, conscious awareness here and now. Will you please share your thoughts? Well,
as long as we understand that as a process, not true nature as a thing, this is the confusion, is that there is a word, and that word is soul. So in theologies that have this word soul, they every now and then they question what is a soul, and if it survives death, what could survive death? And so they philosophize about this. They say, well, a soul must be that which does not change, that which is not subject to decay and death. So it must be unchangeable and indestructible. And there's a word that they sometimes use, monad, M-O-N-A-D, which means kind of like a steel ball bearing, titanium ball bearing. Now, this does not make sense. And this is what the Buddha realized in the 5th century BC. Talking about yourself as an unchanging entity that persists, that's essential, doesn't make sense, because if that's what you are, you can't feel, you can't experience, you can't be conscious, you can't make decisions, because all of those are processes, and an unchanging monad, an unchanging thing, a ball bearing, can't do any of those things. So if your soul was that kind of thing, then it couldn't be conscious, and it has no relevance to how you experience yourself and your life. So the Buddha is saying, well, there isn't one of those things, and the idea of something that is unchanging or above change or something like that is not able. You're not able to. It makes no sense. But does it mean then that when you die, everything ceases? You just simply cease at death? No, it doesn't mean that either. By the way, I say a lot of modern thinking is annihilationist like that. So many modern people don't believe that there's a soul, or that you go to another life after this. So they also agree that there is no immortal essence, unchanging essence. So that's just normal psychology. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You can look for it, you don't find it. But does it mean that therefore, at the end of one's life, then annihilation occurs? Well, no, that doesn't mean that. I mean, the Buddha is saying that it's a process, and the process just continues. It's just a flow of things. Like energy is neither created nor destroyed, but only changes. So we understand it in physics that a process, something apparently disappears. Matter is energy. Energy is matter. Some sort of substance appears to cease, but actually it's impossible, because matter and energy are the same. So it just transforms. It just changes into another form. So that's what the Buddha is primarily saying. So I don't know how you want to interpret what Ajahn Sona is saying. I don't speak in those terms. I just try to reiterate how the Buddha explains these things. So you'll have to. I can't comment on Ajahn Sumedho's explanation of that, but I always go back to the suttas, how the Buddha explains these things, and I think it's very important that we do. We need a primary education in the West. A lot of people identify as Buddhist, or they like Buddhism and so forth. They've only heard snatches of this and that, so they're not very well educated in it. So this is kind of what this live stream is about. Basic education, answering all kinds of questions, clearing up these things, because most people don't have time to read it. The recorded sayings of the Buddha are about the same length as the Encyclopedia Britannica. They're about 45 volumes. And that's a lot of reading and trying to understand for anybody. Fortunately, monks have all the time in the world to do this, but most people don't. So in order to, well, first, monks in the West have to inform themselves about this. The next thing they have to do is put it into easily understood language, whatever that language is. I happen to speak English, so I try to put these ideas into English, and then we have to find a medium that allows people to access this information. So in the old days, we wrote books, but in these days, we use things like YouTube, video, and so forth to educate people at not only the basic level, but this conversation and some of the questions are quite advanced. So we look at basic education, and then medium education, and some of the higher, more difficult concepts as well. So that's important. And so I don't introduce concepts outside of the basic teachings of the Buddha, the education that the Buddha leaves behind. There's an interesting conversation the Buddha has with some monks. They're walking through the forest, and the Buddha picks up a handful of leaves, and he says, "Monks, which is greater, the leaves in my hand or all the leaves in the trees in this forest?" Now, this is an easy question, isn't it? The monks say, "I think the leaves in the forest are much greater than the leaves in your hand." And the Buddha says, "Yes, you're right." So he says, "Now, this handful of leaves is what I teach. What I know is equivalent to all the leaves in the forest, but I don't teach that because it's not necessary for the overcoming of suffering." And that's the whole purpose of my teaching is this. There's suffering, and there's an end to it. So that handful of leaves is the education that he leaves behind. He's not interested in explaining the universe. He's only interested in explaining some very pertinent subjects to people that they can use in their life for the removal of unnecessary suffering. That's because this is the priority in life. He says it's just a shame that people suffer unnecessarily. And that's the priority that he has. So how do you reduce the suffering? Through you understand things differently, and then your suffering decreases. And perhaps if you really understand things well, suffering goes away. So this is why I stay with the suttas and so forth. Let's go on, Pia.
Next question is from Avon in Malaysia. I've been caring for a mother cat and her 3 kittens, and after 4 months, she got pregnant again and had 3 more kittens. I've been advised to spay her and other strays in the neighborhood. Is spaying or neutering stray animals, such as cats, viewed as ethical and compassionate from a Buddhist perspective, or could it be considered a form of, quote, bright and dark karma?
Yes, almost a question about birth control, isn't it? Now, the Catholics have their view of birth control. They don't like that. But Buddhism is fine with birth control. There's a saying, more kids, more suffering. So Buddhism is fine with birth control. Although it's very interesting talking to some of my friends in Thailand. Thailand there's stray dogs all over the place, stray cats and everything, and they quite often it's a kind of a different attitude. We have really turned these animals into almost our children. You know, they're pets. A lot of cultures don't have such a strange relationship with these pets and so forth. They kind of wander around on the streets and get by as they can, dogs and cats. They're kind of useful. They keep away the rats and the mice and stuff, you know. But I was talking to somebody, a Thai woman who had married a Canadian veterinarian, and the vet, how they need to control the population of animals, so they're always spaying and neutering these animals, and when they went to Thailand, they were saying, this is out of control here. You got all these mangy dogs all over the place. You gotta spay them or neuter them or something. And the Thai lady was quite shocked at this. She just had an attitude that, that's their life. They don't interfere with it. Just let them do their thing. And I really hadn't thought about that. It's interesting. I guess with wild animals, we just let them do their thing to some extent. I guess we shoot them if there's too many of them. The Western attitude is just shoot them, which is not Buddhist. So Buddhism does not allow the possibility of just poisoning a bunch of animals or shooting them. It doesn't have that possibility. But do we have the possibility of birth control? I think birth control would be all right. The animal really isn't harmed by this. In fact, they may benefit from that. So I think birth control is all right, both for humans and for animals. So that's how I would answer. It's an interesting, very interesting ethical question. Yeah.
Next question from the live stream is from Moria. Ajahn, what would you say about monks who tell lay people not to meditate until stream entry because, as they claim, the Buddha only gave meditation instructions to those with right view in the suttas?
Well, monks that say that's rather bizarre. I would like to talk to that monk. I say, what are you talking about? Don't say such a thing, Venerable Sir. That is not the case. The Buddha gave Dhamma teachings to people who are unenlightened, and that's how they attained sota. That's how they attained stream enters, because they meditated. It's absurd. That advice is very bad. I don't know where they got that idea, but it's a bad idea. Okay, next.
Next question from the live stream is from Chloe in Portland, Oregon, United States. Ajahn, do advanced practitioners feel grief, or is the death of a loved one just more poignant and meaningful, but without suffering?
Well, when we say advanced practitioner, it depends on what we mean by that. Like, long before enlightenment takes place, you can get quite a lot of emotional transformation, reduction of all kinds of emotional suffering just by meditating and listening to Dhamma talks and having a viewpoint. Short of enlightenment, a lot of progress can be made quite short of enlightenment, and you can be a pretty good practitioner. You can actually have access to deep states of peace and ease and joy and loving kindness and all these things without even being enlightened. And because of that, grief is reduced. Grief at loss of loved ones and so forth is reduced. You don't suffer so long or so deeply. But you do still have it's not that you have no feelings about anybody. You actually have access to loving kindness and compassion. You celebrate other people's joys and so forth. So that's how to think about it. And then there's stages of enlightenment. Anatta, the Buddha's attendant, had attained the first stage of enlightenment, and at the death of the Buddha, he was weeping fairly uncontrollably near the death of the Buddha. The Buddha himself, as he was dying, Ananda was there, and Ananda had been listening to the Buddha for 25 years. He was his attendant, and he had attained the first stage of enlightenment, called Sotapanna. And Ananda knew the Buddha was dying, and he's weeping. And the Buddha, lying on his side in a state of advanced illness, chastised the Ananda and saying, Ananda, what I've been teaching you for 25 years here, like everything's impermanent, including the Buddha, wait, now you're weeping away there, so pull yourself together. And in the background, there are a few monks around him that are arahants, that are fully enlightened, and they're dry-eyed. They're not, even at the death of the Buddha, they're not moved. So to really be free of all traces of grief is a very high state of enlightenment. And in the first, especially in the first two stages of enlightenment, one still can experience a sense of loss and grief, but it's not persistent. It's quite mild, and it is not long enduring, right? Right. So that's kind of the description of the spectrum of sense of grief and loss at loved one's demise,
Next question from the live stream is from Zhao Wu in Orange County, California, United States. Can you elaborate on impermanence, aimlessness, and how it can work with chanda, one of the iddhipadas, without conflicting with each other?
Anpanita, can we get that?
Appanihita.
Panita, and chanda. Okay, so aimlessness. So apparently, they interpret that word as aimlessness. Well, it sounds like the root of that is lack of wisdom. Apanita, panya is wisdom. I don't know. Anyway. Chanda is strong aspiration, and is quite recommended. Chanda is they're talking about what are called iddhipadas. There are 4 iddhipadas. Iddhipada means the path of psychological strength. Primarily, it's kind of like advanced education. And should you have desire for increased enlightenment, and then people are confused about this. So the Buddha is teaching this, sort of saying that desire is the root of a lot of suffering, but not to abandon desire for enlightenment. So chanda is usually this aspiration to enlightenment, and that's important to keep. And a strong determination to continue towards your increase of wisdom and the reduction of your suffering. And eventually, when you achieve that, you won't need the desire to achieve it. The desire to achieve that goes with the achievement of it. And then that's the end of your unnecessary suffering.
Next question is from the live stream from Johan in Sweden. Dear Ajahn, is it a waste of time to try to convince others that, for example, hunting is wrong? I suppose my fault is that I get overly angry about it, but at the same time I feel a, quote, duty to do so. I would appreciate your advice.
Yeah, you can get a bit of a missionary about various things. All kinds of people have these strong opinions about things. The Buddha himself would probably say, you don't lecture people in a futile fashion. If people aren't ready to hear things, you're just usually wasting your time, and they're very resistant to these ideas. There might be a better way to do it. It's more like appreciation of the sophistication of animals. I think, that these days with the internet, you see incredible capacities of animals that we were not aware of before. The animals befriend each other. They have noble qualities. They have all kinds of interesting aspects, and It's more like paying attention to the sophistication of animals and the awareness of animals that might change your attitudes or people's attitudes towards hunting, hunting them. Yeah. Yeah, you can really, and also this kind of activity will go on, and you're suffering pointlessly about it because you can't just stop people from doing this. And if you make accusatory arguments, they often just dig in and just want to refute your arguments. But if you come at it in a very different way, where you expose them to the sophistication and intelligence of animals, they may change their minds about this. Yeah. Okay, next.
Next question from the live stream is from Hubert in Switzerland. Dear Ajahn, I have a question regarding cutting people off from our lives. Do we owe them any explanations, or can we just stop answering their messages?
Depends on the situation. If they're not, if communication is futile, then you just stop. There is no obligation to continuously re-explain why you can't associate with them. This happens in courts of law. You just have a block. They block. Some people won't take no for an answer. So when that happens, then they're taken to a court and said, you, sir, must stop communicating with that person. You must not go within 200 yards of their house. You must not email. You must not phone. You must not talk to them because they don't want you to. And that's the end of the explanation. So some people don't get that message. They say, look, I really, I need to move on. This relationship here is not helping me, etc. But people don't take that. They won't take that for an answer. So you just have to stop trying to explain. There is a saying, never complain and never explain. And that is I think it was Prime Minister of England, Gladstone, was asked, how do you manage to be a Prime Minister? He said, never complain and never explain. So sometimes in relationships, you have to stop complaining and stop explaining. Yeah.
Next question from the live stream is from Indian. How should one practice when there is low faith with many feelings and thoughts that lead one away from the path?
Oh, well, faith is one of the spiritual powers, and it is on the one end of the spectrum, and wisdom is on the other end of the spectrum. You need both. We can't know everything ahead of time. We can't figure out everything ahead of time. Sometimes we have to go ahead with a sense of openness and trust into the unknown. And that's what faith is to move into the unknown, aspiring to learn and to become knowledgeable. And if you don't have that, then you just sit there. You can't move. You just think about things too much and you never make a move. So it's an important quality, and you'll find out if some people are very weak in a sense of having. So we would define faith as a reasoned conviction. You have reasons for your convictions. You don't know for sure, but you have convictions based on some reasoning, and that is what you might call faith. But if you're not, if your temperament is such that you need absolute absolute surety about things ahead of time, you're going to be sitting there for a long time, not moving. Very unsatisfactory condition. Yeah. Okay, one last question.
Our final question today is from the live stream from Krypton Air. Is, quote, self, unquote, the self perceived through the khandhas? Therefore, the, quote, non-self is what's outside of that?
No. I won't leave you like that. So the self is a it's a concept. And what one needs to do is ask yourself, what do I mean by myself? So this is one way to do it. Find something in your experience that you think is yourself. And when you look seriously for this, you don't find anything. You don't find a self. All you find is processes. You find consciousness, you find feelings, you find perceptions, you find a body, but the body is always flowing and changing, There's no core to the body, it's always changing. Even your fingerprints are changing in size and so forth. Everything about you is changing. Every cell in your body is passing away, isn't it? And being refreshed. So when you look for such a thing as a self, you don't find one. And you don't find one outside of the body, feelings, perceptions, consciousness, and volitions. So this is what they call the 5 khandhas, the 5 groups or aspects of a person, 5 things. One of them is physical, and then there's 4 mental sort of processes. You don't find an enduring, unchanging self in the middle of that, and you don't find one outside of that either. And that's, explicitly claimed by the Buddha. Neither within the 5 khandhas or outside of them do you find a self. Yeah. Okay, well, we will conclude our initial return for this season, and we will see you next week if everything works out.